So this is just hyperbolic, and it's not true. You're literally just spreading propaganda that was passed over 100 years ago. There was no population explosion of Chinese in Mexico back in the early 1900s. In fact, back in the early 1900s, the population was about 13,000, which is very small compared to the rest of the population. Just as how in the present day, us Mexicans and Latinos are portrayed as morally degenerate people that are stealing others' jobs, the Chinese were also portrayed this way in the early 1900s in Mexico as well. They were accused of undermining Mexican values, the whole nine yards. There was even restrictions to try to prevent marriages between Chinese men and Mexican women. And the reason for this is because the Chinese community worked really well in Mexico, and they invested a lot into propping their businesses up and having success. And so because they were having such enormous success in various sectors like agriculture, other Mexicans got threatened by that. They had xenophobia, and they wanted to scapegoat them for the fact that they themselves weren't doing that well or that they weren't successful. This was not unique to Mexico. I mean, the U.S. had anti-Chinese movements as well back in the late 1800s, and obviously this also got exacerbated with the Great Depression. So again, they were just mostly scapegoated, and this was all propaganda to vilify the Chinese people when they came to Mexico and set up these communities. So a lot of people were expelled and deported, but there was no legitimate threat of a Red Scare or the Chinese taking over Mexico or anything like that. And unfortunately, in the state of Coahuila, in Torreon, you had a massacre that occurred, and this was after the federal forces were expelled by the Mexican revolutionaries. There was a mob type of attack, and they massacred a lot of Chinese immigrants, which is deeply shameful, honestly. It's a dark chapter in Mexican history. But again, this just goes back to the propaganda, the scapegoating, and the xenophobia at play, which is shit that still has not abated in other areas like the United States today in the present day. There's a lot of parallels here now. And it's such a shame because, had there not been a massacre, had there not been expulsions, we would have more cultural intermixing, we'd have more cultural exchange, we'd probably have a lot more Chinese-descended Mexicans in Coahuila, especially because there was a lot of them there, but in also other places of Mexico, so we'd have a more diverse community. And it's just such a shame that people had to let their fucking racism and xenophobia ruin shit.